All right. Thanks. Good morning, everybody, once again. My name is Atul Kabra. I was one of the founders at a company called PolyLogyx, where we built an endpoint security platform. And very recently, we joined hands with Eclectic IQ. That's a threat intelligence platform company, one of the leading ones, because there are certain parts of the security and how it is moving forward, the vision and the way things are changing. We shared quite vehemently on these topics, and we believe that by bringing in the two components of endpoint security that PolyLogyx had built and the threat intelligence platform that Eclectic IQ leads into, could leave the path for the new generation of threat hunting and security models. Just as a couple of things I picked up from the previous panel session, I think it was Trevor who mentioned that the security in the future is going to be very data-driven and analytics-driven. Now, and I totally agree with that, but the question is, if you drill down to this statement one level below, where is this data and analysis coming from? And I think threat intelligence is a very key component. And this is what's leading us to set up a vision, which is that intelligence needs to be the component to lead the security rather than a tool that is fed at an upstream level. And as we go down the presentation, I'll probably double click on what I exactly mean by that statement. Another thing that I learned from the previous panel discussion was that diversity is the future. The IT fabric, the workforce, everything, the infrastructure, it's diversity. And I think all the panelists quite clearly agreed on that. And this diversity is going to create new problems or challenges as well as opportunities in the way security is designed. And once again, we believe that a combination of Intel-led approaches is the right approach to move forward for the security. Now, we all know of the product, the antiviruses, and at some point, the antiviruses, which were very binary sort of design to keep the devices safe, failed to keep up with the demands of the security as the attackers changed, as the attackers became more and more sophisticated. And then specifically in the concept of endpoints, we came up with this new technology called EDR, which is more about collecting telemetry, collecting user behaviors, collecting all kinds of data that a sensor could generate, and then apply analytics on top of it somewhere off the ball. They shifted the model from the traditional stop it right then and there, and now this also led into the world of hunting. That is, if you did not know at the time, or you did not have a signature at the time of an activity being good or bad, there was a potential to be able to go and find out if something bad was missed in the beginning, but now you can catch it. And therefore, the idea of threat hunting, which predominantly led from incident response use cases, started to come into the picture. And now three metrics are actually validating that this hunting was very useful, because as more studies are coming up that the attacks have been dormant or active in the enterprise networks for quite some amount of time. And these are not just any small mom and pop shop stores we're talking about. We're talking about global enterprises that have had a lot of budget to invest into their cybersecurity infrastructure, yet the attackers made after a long amount of time period. We wanted to change this model now to the next zone, which is instead of active hunting, how about we create a practice of proactive hunting? And that's also not, I should say, threat detection, which is all around an incident response. An incident led to a exercise about detecting whether there was a breach, and then you could correlate or collect all the data. But that exercise was somewhat limiting because the attackers may have moved some of their footprints, the information may not be quite up to date, and anyway, the damage to a certain extent has already happened into the organization. And in threat hunting, or I should say proactive threat hunting, we are advocating of a strategy where intelligence can actually help you or assist you in being able to detect attack before they've happened, or at least reduce the time from the breach to actual detection. So if this is about to be able to do that, there are definitely some clear advantages. Obviously, the time to resolution or detection goes down. The amount of damage, amount of any data loss or downtime to businesses can go down. And with the remote workforce, where the IT infrastructure is kind of split between the fully protected enterprise network versus some non-enterprise network like home networks or some other scenarios, the proactive hunting can give early signs if any of those cracks are widening or if the attackers are being able to find a foothold through any of these other places. The big shift in the hunting model from the legacy, and the word legacy may sound as if I'm talking about many decades ago, but it's actually not that old, is a shift in how this hunting needs to happen. The first generation or the first phase of hunting was very IOC centric. So you could subscribe to thread feeds for standard indicators, your IP addresses or file hashes, and then those indicators could be fed into the security tool, and you could get an answer whether the evidence of any of these malicious indicators was present into the enterprise. This was indeed pretty cumbersome, and one of the drawbacks about this approach is that it could be enormously time consuming. While you could get a binary answer whether something was visible or not, it really does not provide a sufficient feedback loop that how or why did that happen, or what is the complete attack picture. So in case if somebody wants to put a procedure in place for such activity not to happen, this becomes more and more difficult. It would create a lot of fatigue between the analysts who's doing it, because the threat feeds or the IOCs, they grow quite rapidly with time. And that fatigue and this growth in volume is will obviously lead to a lower of the efficiency in the SOC, and then the slow detection and resolution rates, which is the problem that we want to avoid in the first place. Some of the other challenges about this hunting, as I already talked about, is that it may not be able to give a complete picture of the attack. I mean, sure, you can get a binary answer, but if you had to construct a picture, construct a story so that the policymakers can take appropriate measures for future or in future to be able to prevent such attacks, it lacked that kind of feedback loop. As I'm sure many of you would have heard about this new multi-stage attacks that use existing binaries or fileless techniques. The IOC-based hunting is very, very inefficient in being able to detect such attacks. Like, for example, very recently we were analyzing an incident in a customer site, and the attack was through a phishing email where the macro in this Word document created a scheduled task on the Windows operating system, which was actually downloading the payload from a third-party site. In this case, was Pastebin, and the entire payload was highly obfuscated. And there is no way any kind of indicator-based search could result to that kind of detection. And more importantly, to be able to make things more complicated, the attack was creating randomized names for these tasks or the Windows services where it was creating its persistence. And the last, as the IOCs become very voluminous or they are kind of siloed in pieces, this whole process becomes very cumbersome. There is no integrated view across multiple tools or multiple technologies that are deployed, and therefore tying data from different sources, collecting it, collaborating it all together, or creating in some unified database so that it becomes searchable or correlatable becomes enormously complex. So what we are now looking at a new model is a lot motivated or driven from how attack detection happens in the real world. So in the real world, the intelligence agencies are constantly gathering information about potential attacks at the local level as well as possibly at the global level, and then their security strategies are built around feeding on those intelligence. Now, of course, it is a complex process. Not every intel can be acted upon. Not every intel carries the same fidelity. And this is where some part of threat hunting becomes more of an art than science. But then at least the quality of the feed can be improved. There are mechanisms that can be built so that the intel that becomes the central component for a hunting strategy can be improved. And this is where we feel the new model of hunting, as we are calling it, intelligent hunting or intel-driven hunting, can come into play by bringing in appropriate pieces. When it translates into a more of a execution strategy, the first thing is a good intel platform that can drive the ability to formulate a strategy for a hunting. And as I mentioned, not each intel carries equal fidelity. There has to be a mechanism or a framework to be able to identify how to translate the intelligence into something that can be fed into the software tool or cybersecurity tools. Frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK frameworks, attack matrix, gives a very nice way of overlaying the intelligence, and then you can identify which components where, or at least the starting places, which components carry importance to start the hunting process. And this layout of MITRE framework actually can act a bridge between the intelligence as well as the telemetry or as well as the activity collection. And this can help answer very important questions like what exactly are we hunting for? How do we begin finding it? How long it may take to find that? And this can help the analysts become more productive and more efficient. And part of the skill, as we talked about the skills needed in the SOC, part of the about skill maturing is the process that can the analysts or the professional tasks to do this kind of hunting jobs be enabled with intelligence-driven hunting. This is where we complete the picture, which is intelligent hunting is about bringing the smart intel and smart telemetry. By smart intelligence, I mean that it is a collection of various source and various feeds, which can then deduplicate it, which can then parse it out, make the correlation, make the relevance. And it is also associating not the IOCs with not just the maliciousness about them, but also the TTPs and the campaigns. Because in order to complete a picture, we want to give the intel an intelligence view that this IOC was detected as a part of this technique or in this campaign. For example, of late, we observe a lot of COVID-themed campaigns where phishing campaigns come in the form of alluring the end user to give COVID-related information. But behind the scene, it turns out that it is a door into creating a breach. The data gathering should also enable the analysis and collaboration between the human analysts sitting on these threat intel feeds. And this automatically acts as a filter of weeding out the intel that may or may not be relevant in that particular use case or in that particular scenario. And this intel should be actionable intelligence. And what that means is it should actually be able to give the consumer the choices as to what happens when this intelligence or the evidence of these intelligence, whatever it is carrying, is detected. Of course, as we talked about it, that we live in a very diverse world. The consumption of this intel can also go in different tools, and therefore the output formats need to set the appropriate operations workflow. Now, on the other hand, the intel presents one component to what the hunting teams have to look at. It needs to be equally backed by the sensors that are generating the telemetry or the data based on which this intelligence can be applied. And within that, there are a variety of tools and options available. including the ones that can provide a simple stream of all the activities versus the ones that give you a more sophisticated way of collecting what telemetry, to configure what telemetry to capture. And it's not just a one-time capture, because hunting process requires the ability to query and investigate the devices in question during the hunting process or live. So if the telemetry tools do not provide a capability of live investigation, it may not lead into a efficient hunting process. Similarly, the telemetry collection should not, if it's just an collection in isolation, for example, collection of all the file hashes or all the IP addresses, it could again be a very low efficiency hunting component. Whereas if it is more context aware, if the telemetry collection also is able to build a context as to which activity, which user, or under what surroundings was this event or action happened on the particular device, this could provide the more breadth of matching points for the threat intel side. And one of the biggest things about telemetry is not just the technology, but it's the budget. I mean, in no time, the volume of this collection becomes so high that the ROI starts to diminish, and then people start tuning them down or up so that the evidences are not available when the actual hunting workflow comes in. So it's more important to evaluate the telemetry sensors in a way that what kind of costing efficiencies are inbuilt, and that not only just the cost of storage or cost of the infrastructure, but also the cost in terms of performance on the devices or in terms of the load that other business functions may have to suffer because of this type of telemetry collection. Now, when these two highly efficient products meet, and then of course, then there comes the layers into what the hunting job will actually entail, which should be able to automate the certain things. But automation is only about eliminating the redundant aspects or the low value aspects. At the end of the day, we believe in enabling the analysts to be able to focus on things that matter more by not replacing analysts. Automation is not a replacement option for an analyst, but it is about taking away the jobs which are high time consuming, but not that important in terms of the final result. So another very big aspect of the vision that we are actually betting on is the ability to create collaboration, whether at the telemetry collection point or whether at the intelligence. The security problem is so unique that one size fits all is going to be very enormously challenging. But if we can collaborate, if the best practices can be shared, if the platforms allow to share the learnings from each other, then the hunting job becomes much easier and much more efficient. And at the end of the day, the reports that get generated needs to be something that can be converted into actionable items for the policymakers. Together, putting all this is what we have to finally come up with a threat hunting strategy. Of course, as I said, threat hunting is not just merely science. There is a complex element of creativity and artistic capabilities of the analyst involved into that, because there is no one standard book which can be followed or one standard playbook. And this is where we define the pyramid of pain in the threat hunting. I mean, it's very easy and trivial to just search for known bad indicators, especially the file hash values that rarely change. The IP addresses and domain names are slightly more complex because of their volatility in the nature. And then as we go up, the most complex or the hardest part is where we have to identify attacks purely based on their TTPs, because they cover a huge overlap between what is good and what is bad. And being able to make sense of the gray activity is where the analyst's ability is tested. And this part is what we believe is targeted at intelligence-based hunting. The combination of right intelligence platforms with the right telemetry availability is where is essential to be able to ease the pain in this hardest part or at the top of the pyramid. And the MITRE framework is an excellent way, I already mentioned about that, of creating a way of structuring the attacks or studying the attacks. And then MITRE framework also has various cells. Some of them give a very high confidence towards whether there's a breach or attack in progress, and others are more indicative in nature, which are pretty high in the volume, and therefore to be able to construct a story on the entire matrix, the breadth of picture that is needed is pretty requires a good amount of collection on both sides, intelligence as well as the telemetry. So what at Eclectic IQ, this is how we have set in motion our vision for XDR. I mean, of course, it's the new term in the industry. The Gartners and the other agencies are still defining what this term would eventually mean to the market. Newer terms is a constant phenomena in technology industry, and especially ours. So whether it becomes XDR, YDR, ZDR in future, time will tell. But for now, let's just call it the XDR. And at Eclectic IQ, this is how we are formulating our XDR vision based on a Intel-led hunting, because this is the only solution that we can see today to be able to reduce the pain in the most complex part of the pyramid of pain of threat hunting. And how is this whole vision or this whole story being translated into our products? I can just provide a small overview. So we started to create a portfolio of products and services to start addressing each and every aspect. And I'm sure other vendors and other providers are doing the job to the best of their understanding and their capabilities. We started publishing the regular advisories on the latest themes that we observe in our platforms. We already have a fusion center to fuse the threat intelligence sources from different platforms, and that can enable the smart Intel box that I presented. And I'll just give a little bit overview about that. We're also investing into creating an academy where curriculums and programs will be available for threat hunting strategies, and then the endpoint platform that became part of the Eclectic IQ family after PolyLogyx joined hands with Eclectic IQ. So just to give a brief overview on our threat intelligence platform and how it maps to the smarter Intel box that I mentioned above. The Intel, the tip or the Fusion Center box actually brings in the feeds from different sources. So, and it can ingest the data at pretty high scale. It can then provide the abilities for analysts to create collaborative workflows focused on campaigns, focused on indicators, focused on techniques, and then it can improve the efficiency in the overall CTI practice by aligning the output of intelligence with the security efforts across the threat that are active, that are currently more visible in the industry or the vertical that it is being served into. Similarly, on the endpoint or the telemetry side, the Eclectic IQ PolyLogyx endpoint platform is designed to cover an enormously wide range of data points at a cost that the devices can completely bear, that the business processes can completely absorb. It's not just about sending raw telemetry of activities and actions that are happening on the endpoint, but it brings in the context awareness of each activity, which helps in creating a hunting playbook or a hunting workflow on top of it. And the point-in-time collection is backed by the ability to do the live investigation for additional forensics or additional data collection. As that piece is very critical because each attack may be different. And in some attacks, the memory forensics might be more important, whereas in some attacks, the network telemetry might be more important. The endpoint platform is designed to be able to give the analyst the choice of being able to collect the data that they deem necessary in a given hunting workflow. The platform is also backed with certain response action, and for automation, there's a lot of API available that can be created for workflows. or that can also be able to create playbooks which can then be shared for a collaborative environment. Last but not least, which I mentioned about, is the cost of storage. In case of the simple telemetry streamers, the cost of storing the telemetry can become very high in a very amount of time, because endpoint devices are usually very chatty, especially the ones with Windows. Therefore, the tiered storage model, or collect what's necessary and bring on the server what's essentially critical, and then bring more at the later point, with a combination of live investigation and a streaming telemetry option, is what's inbuilt into the platform to assist with the costing part. And this is mostly what I had for giving an overview of our vision into intelligence-led hunting. I believe there were some questions on the chat. There's still something I'm happy to take.
Well, thank you very much, Atul. Very, very interesting. We got a small debate-question going on in the chat. One, it says, is there actually a difference between intelligent hunting and active threat hunting? And then somebody was sort of referring to the MITRE ATT&CK framework as the thing that cleared that up. But maybe you could shed some light on it.
Well, I wouldn't say intelligent hunting and active hunting are apple to apple. I think these two terms mean slightly different connotations. Intelligent hunting essentially is about how you strategize your hunting. What are the tools and technologies, and how are you composing it to create a strategy for your hunting. Active hunting could be just about a point in time, or more of a chronological hunting in your everyday job. Am I doing hunting every day 10 a.m.? But it doesn't necessarily imply the quality of the tools that I have actually created, or the flexibility of strategy that I'm using in being able to do the active hunting. So it's more of an operational connotation, in my opinion, active hunting, that yes, we have a practice of doing active hunting every day. Whereas intelligent hunting is sort of giving a way on how do you raise the bar when you create your hunting strategy.
Okay, no, that's good. And your colleague Joost also commented, to that effect. So that's great. I guess because the MSS London is all about combining an MSS, MSP, and end user audience. I think a lot of this, is very self-explanatory if you're an end user. But how can a channel partner, or an MSS or an MSP, how could they bundle a solution such as this? How could they persuade the end customer to need it, or is this something for the MSS themselves?
Well, that's always a tough question, right? Because to be very honest, at the end of the day, security industry is viewed as an insurance industry, right? People buy it because you have to buy it. We rarely go and see how is one insurance better than the other, unless we land in the problem. But the fact of the matter is, at least in the cyberspace, we are landing into problems every day. It's not the mom and pop stores that are getting breached. It is the industries or the organizations with billions of dollars of annual spending in security budgets. They are constantly getting breached, of all sizes and shapes. Now, in my view, the MSS partners are the future of the security strategies for any organization, because they bridge the skill gap that most organizations feel. So if they get convinced that what the right strategy for an organization's security posture is, and how much do they need to invest in products versus services versus the additional operational activities like hunting, that's the first step. Because then the ROI on those things can be shown much easily. I mean, do you want to take a medicine only after you fall sick, or do you want to continuously exercise and build your immune system? That's a choice that, of course, the smart enterprise will make. But the MSS, I think, is a very important. MSS partners are very important in the entire chain, because companies have bought so many products, and they figure out that they lack the ability to make them work. Eventually, they have to turn to these specialists to derive the value out of those products. And often invite the influence and guidance from them to what products they need to invest so that at the end of the day, they can get the ROI on their security investment. So in that regard, I think the MSS, especially the conferences like these, are pretty interesting, very useful conferences because they can excite the MSS partners as to what's happening new or what kind of new visions the product makers like us are projecting.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Atul. And this is a great look at intelligent threat hunting, highly relevant for this conference. And but we are now out of time. So Atul, thank you very much. Please give Atul a warm virtual round of applause. It's a pleasure welcoming you, and I look forward to seeing you in the audience soon.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.